Hi, everybody. Today we are going to be learning about something called the symbolic cycle. And in order to do that, we've got this graphic organizer in front of us, and you should fill in your graphic organizer as I'm filling in mine. We have this oval and it's divided into quadrants, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to start to do some brainstorming. In the first quadrant, we're going to write the word spring. And to get started, I'd like you to think about colors for spring. If you think about spring, you might envision yellow. You might write down green. Sometimes students name, pink and orange, and they think of all the beautiful spring flowers. But if you ask students inevitably which is the dominant color of spring, they will almost always say green. So let's go to our next quadrant. Our next quadrant is going to be summer. Go ahead and write that up in the top. And if you think about dominant colors for summer, there are lots. And so we'll just jot some down. Students often say green. It's a different green, though, isn't it? It's a green that's more of a rich, deep green. It's not that bright green of spring. Students say yellow. They say blue. They say red. We have flowers. When asked what the dominant color for spring would be, students often say either yellow or blue. Feel like the yellow of the sun, the blue of the ocean and sky. Okay. The next one then takes us down here, and this is going to be fall. I'm going to put that down here in that label at the very bottom. And let's brainstorm some colors for fall. We'll say brown and red and yellow and orange. Students might say other colors. And for this one, a dominant color kind of depends on the part of fall, because brown, if you're thinking late fall, November, it's definitely a brown, right? Everything is pretty much dead by then. But if you're thinking early fall, reds and yellows and oranges and even green, these can all be beautiful colors of fall. And then last, we have winter. And I'm going to go ahead and write winter over here in this quadrant. And let's brainstorm some colors for winter. Of course, we have white. Students often say brown or gray. Sometimes green, right? This is the green of like an evergreen. Black, right? The nights are long. Students say black. Dominant color, lots of times students pick white. Sometimes they pick brown or black. Okay? So now let's take this one step further. If spring were a time of life, what would it be? Well, it's birth, right? In the springtime, buds push through the earth. You start to see animals again. They come out of hibernation. So if spring were a time of life, it would be birth. If summer were a time of life, it would be childhood. If fall were a time of life, it would be what we're going to call adulthood. And of course, if spring is birth, winter is, you guessed it, death. And if you think about the seasons around Pennsylvania, they really do follow this cyclical pattern, and the colors as well. Sometimes I have students who say, well, I really like red. That's my favorite color. Or I like Christmas. But we're looking more at the cycle of the seasons versus personal likes or dislikes. Okay? So let's take this again one step further. And if spring were a time of day, what time would it be? Well, spring is morning, isn't it? It's when things are beginning and starting, full of possibility. If summer were a time of day, what time would it be? About noon, right? Midday. If fall were a time of day, it would be evening, right? So I'm going to write evening here. If winter were a time of day, when would it be? It would be night, right? Midnight. Okay, so here we have our symbolic cycle emerging. Let's go now to, let's add a couple more things. And as you can see, this is a cycle. Sometimes students say, oh, it's like, it's like a life cycle in science. Yes, it's definitely a cycle, but this is the symbolic cycle. A symbol is an object, a word that represents something else. So in the spring, of course, we have new life, we have birth, we have growth coming forward, possibility. We move into summer, the cycle continues. Summer is a time of growth, lots and lots of growth, green and beautiful, yellow. Things are growing. I often think of a cornfield. That helps me to visualize this. If I think about how the corn is growing and it's starting to become ripe, and here in the fall, we can see that our cycle is continuing. We move over here. This would be evening. We have the browns, reds, everything maturing, right? Maturity is down here. And then last but not least, everything dies and it lies dormant during winter. And soon, though, winter becomes spring again, and we start this whole cycle of life again. So let's add a few more things here because this is a literature cycle, and we have times of the day, we have stages of life. Let's talk about stages of life. We have birth, children and babies. That moves into childhood and summer. And then we move down here to adulthood, right? We said maturity with the plants, maturity with the adulthood. And then over here we have winter. And of course, at the end of our life is death. Let's add some feelings on here. We're going to add happiness. If you were going to put happiness on this chart, where would you put it? Students always say up here. We see the word summer and we put happiness up here at the top. So I'm going to go ahead and write happiness. And of course, the opposite of happiness is sadness. So I went ahead and I put sadness down here. And if you look at sadness, like that certainly does go with winter and death, right? If you think about people who have that condition where they don't get enough sunlight in the winter, and they truly do get literally sad and depressed. We need to add one other thing, and this is a literary term. And I'm going to put the word innocence up here. I'm going to squeeze it in there, innocence. And in literature, innocence is a little bit different than what we think of it. So when I say innocence, students often say, and I say, what's the opposite? They say, oh, it's guilty. It's not guilty, though. It's not being guilty of something. It's rather lacking something. And in literature, the opposite of innocence is experience. It's knowing things, understanding things, and sometimes it's bad. Sometimes innocence is ignorance, and it's blissful, right? It's something that we don't have to know those terrible things. But down here we have the opposite, which is experience. And if you think about the life cycle, it fits with these emotions. So remember that a symbol is the use of any object or idea to represent something else. Okay, I'm going to write that over here in the corner. An object or idea to represent something else. And this whole thing is called the symbolic cycle. Okay, be sure that you get this down in your ELA notebook. All right, and thanks for watching.